Welcome to the REL Freedom podcast, where we inspire you to pursue your passion to gain time and financial freedom through opportunities in real estate. I'm your host, Mike Swenson. Let's get some real freedom together. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the REL Freedom Show, talking about building wealth, gaining time and financial freedom through different opportunities in real estate. You know, what I really love about highlighting different people's stories is everybody has a different journey. Everybody has a different set of skill sets and passions that they have. And so really the goal of these episodes is to help you find somebody that you connect with, find a story, find a path that really resonates with you, and take action. I had listened to a podcast earlier this week, and somebody was talking about, you know, there's so many real estate investor wealth building theorists out there that talk about what you should do, but they don't take action on it. And so here's somebody today that's taking action, putting himself out there and working on his path. And so we've got Jack Duffley here. Jack is a commercial real estate attorney and also real estate investor, currently in Houston, Texas. Previously, you were in Chicago. In addition to that, you also own a steam cleaning business. And so like a lot of people that we see, you've got a few different spots where you've got irons in the fire and you're continuing to grow and to put it together. And so we're excited to hear about your story and how it's coming along. So welcome to the show, Jack.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the very warm intro. Not quite as warm as it is here in Houston right now. It's like 101 degrees outside, but you know, we're not in Chicago anymore. But yeah, I appreciate that. You mentioned having all the irons in the fire. Sometimes I just wonder if it's too many at once. And you know, I guess that's the journey. You go from doing too much to too little to too much again. And just a constant balancing act. But happy to be here, and I appreciate you having me on.
And I know a lot of people, they talk about the focus piece, right? Like, you know, the one thing. I know you've actually, I saw that on your website talking about, you know, reading The One Thing and Gary Keller's Pursuit. And, you know, previously I was with Keller Williams and we read that book an awful lot. So there's an approach there, knock down that domino and keep going. And then for a lot of people too, you know, I read another thing this week where they were talking about having that diversity to be able to adapt as markets change and as things change. And so there's different paths out there. I'm sure Gary, he's a strong personality. He would tell you his way is the right way. And yet at the other times, there's a ton of people out there that are doing different things and have that flexibility. And the cool thing is you can shape your life the way that you want to. And so some people take a different path. And so talk a little bit about your background heading up to where you're at today. And then we'll talk a little bit more and dig deeper.
Sure. And funny you bring up that range post. Man, this got to be a few years old at this point when I was first kind of starting the documenting. So you went deep into it. But yeah, I kind of ebb and flow on how much the one thing and focusing on one thing, sometimes that makes a lot more sense than diversifying, getting more perspectives. We could talk more about that. But as for kind of what I'm doing now and how I got here, I started my kind of real estate investing journey right out of undergrad. I went to the University of Illinois and then proceeded to go to law school right after that. I was going to law school at night up at Chicago Kent College of Law. It's a kind of a mid-tier school in downtown Chicago. They had an evening program and I ended up getting a full ride to school. So that was a big reason I went to law school, because it just wasn't going to have that same financial burden. And I was thinking I'd come out of school as like a JD advantaged real estate guy. And long story short, I found that my best opportunities were in law, because a lot of people weren't bothering to give me a job because they just thought I'd be an attorney. I was applying to like analyst spots and all that stuff, but they weren't having it because they saw my resume and it screamed law, and that's one of my best opportunities ended up being. So I finally caved and became an attorney, which I am today. But while I was in law school, my very first year, I got my first property, which was a house hack in Chicago. It was a 2-bed, 2-bath condo. So while I was kind of waiting for my wife to finish school, she was she did like a dual degree, so she was like a year behind me there. We're the same age though. And waiting for her to finish her school, and then we'd get married thereafter. I started house hacking, renting out the extra bedroom, extra bathroom, and that was a really nice way to completely subsidize my housing costs while I went through law school. Couple years after that.
Was this like a short-term rental, or was it a long-term rental where you just had a tenant and they just rented out that room?
Yeah, it was a long-term. My condo association actually didn't allow for short-term. And it was a little bit vague on roommate kind of partial unit restrictions, but I didn't bring it to their attention.
All homeowner associations are different. So,
yeah. it was a pretty small building. It was only like eight units. And I still own that unit as a rental today, which was the ultimate plan. Get that great owner occupied financing, hold on to it, turn it into a full-time rental. And that's what it is now. And it's appreciated nicely and rent's gone up a good bit. And it's in a really desirable spot in Chicago, like right along the lake. It's like a garden unit of condo. It's how I was able to afford it, even though it's in a pretty good spot. I had to go underground for it, I guess. But that was kind of my first foray officially into real estate. I'd been listening to Bigger Pockets and all that great stuff for years at that point, and was really getting to know the game a lot more. None of my family are really in real estate, so I was kind of learning a lot about the investment perspectives and all that from some of those sources, and it was great. Learned a lot on that deal. A couple of years later, we run into the pandemic era and the greatest fiscal binge of all time, which caused a bonanza in real estate all over the place. I was able to buy a rental property in Indianapolis, which actually only 2 days from now, I'm in the middle of selling. So I bought it in July of 2020, and we'll be selling it this Friday is the plan here in June of 2023. Bought that thing for like 85 grand, put 30 to 40 into it over a couple of years, got some nice cash flow, and we're now selling it for 180. So some nice appreciation there. And but I've decided I really want to focus on some other things. I can kind of get back to that, but to round out my real estate journey here, I bought a townhome in Chicago. That was another primary residence in Chicago. Lived in that for a year. We then moved out of that one, bought a house down here in Houston, which is probably not going to be a rental anytime soon, but since my wife and I are getting a little bit tired of the moving so frequently deal, but it's been good so far because we got 2 nice rentals out of it with great financing. That townhome was at like 2.99% fixed for 30 years, so we'll gladly take that right now. So as of now, we have 4 properties. One of them is my house, if you count that, and then one I'm in the middle of selling, which will give us some nice cash that we can use to pay off some debt elsewhere. So that's kind of my real estate arc in a nutshell.
And then talk too about, picking up a steam cleaning business.
Yeah. So this has been part of kind of I've really changed my philosophical lens on this really over the last year, where I increasingly see real estate and stocks in particular as defense when it comes to the world of finance. It's all about preserving your capital. You're protecting yourself against inflation as long as you buy all right, and you get some fixed rate financing ideally. So it's really great for that. You get great tax write-offs, all the stuff that we're plenty familiar with here, all the great benefits of real estate. You can say a lot of the same things about stocks in that you can defer capital gains by, not selling, so you're not taxed while you own it necessarily. And typically those things will go up somewhat with inflation if you buy a good business asset. So anyways, I kind of see those more and more as defense. They're great when you have a lot of cash to protect and grow slowly but surely. And on the flip side, we have offense, which I would consider driving more income. And in some ways, you can kind of use real estate as an offensive tool, especially when it comes to flipping or doing really active real estate investing, where you drive up the income in a big way. But really, I just want to focus right now more on the offensive side of increasing my earning capacity and getting better on that front to where I will have a lot more money to invest into real estate, into stocks, to where a 10% gain makes a huge difference because it's on a big sort of initial principal amount. Whereas right now, let's say I got $100,000 to invest, 10% is 10 grand, and that's all well and good, but it's really not going to move the needle long term considering where I want to go. Whereas if I can learn how to make an extra 100 grand a year, that's repeatable, and that's a skill I can take kind of anywhere, and then I'll use that income that I can now bring in to go invest in those things. That's kind of the philosophical shift I've made. And to that, I started looking at private businesses, looking at those as a way to really scale my income in a big way, because you can usually pick them up for 1 to 3 times free cash flow, their annual free cash flow. So we're talking about really cheap from a cash flow perspective, but there's going to be some more active involvement. Typically, you're now running a business, and depending on how systematized things are, it can be a lot or a little work. But you're always going to have to kind of work through some problems when you take over 100% of a business. So that's kind of that's how I got to this point now, to where I bought a carpet cleaning business carpet and steam cleaning back in January of this year. Shortly after I moved to Houston, I was kind of looking around for businesses or a lot to pick from, narrowed it down to a service-based business, a home service business, very easy to understand. There are plenty of complicated businesses out there. And I just wanted a nice starter business where I could get the fundamentals, practice building a team, try out some strategies with sales and pricing and bundling and all that great stuff, and all the things that go into a business, of which are many things, and really focus on working on that skill of running and managing a team and running and managing a business. So that's how I got to that. It's a relatively small purchase. It was under $200,000, and I used personal loans actually that I qualified for, using my salary at the time. I was working in big law up in Chicago and then down into Houston at the same firm. That's how I got into that, really trying to shift towards that offensive mindset, if you want to call it that.
Back in the day, I used to do some financial planning. That's actually what I originally was considering right out of college. And so I had talked with a financial planner. This was maybe 10 years ago. And he said, one of the things that people don't realize is their greatest asset is their ability to build and earn an income. Right. Exactly. And so like you said, I can spend my time on real estate, which can be passive. I agree. There's a piece there where it's like pushing a snowball down the hill. It's not going to pick up a lot of steam right away, but once it starts to, you can see a lot of results. But yeah, and for somebody in your shoes, you've got the debt from being in law school. Building that income and getting that consistency in your income is really kind of one of the greatest snowballs you can build there. And then that will fuel whatever you decide to do in the future. So yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. Was that something that was a franchise, or did you just buy out somebody? Or
yeah, I bought out it wasn't a franchise. I specifically avoided those just because often they can come with restrictions. And for this kind of first one, I just didn't want to deal with any extra kind of overhead to worry about. Granted, there are plenty of decent franchise opportunities out there if that's what you're going for. But yeah, I wanted something where I could just take control, pivot it however I want to do it, if I needed to. A lot of the businesses I looked at, what you'll often find is that they're either being sold by someone who's looking to retire, or they're sold by someone who has another business that they want to worry about more. So that's almost always what you're going to see. And because you got to think that the really bad businesses, the ones that are failing, probably aren't being sold. They're probably being wound up, heading into bankruptcy. So it's not really going to be like a nice clean sale like you might look at, like with a house in many cases, where it's just listed out on the open market. You got a bunch of people come in, you get your market price for it, and that's it. And it kind of works a lot like a typical real estate transaction. Some of these businesses have real estate involved, so but typically you're just going to see a lot of these are publicly listed. They're not always off market. Many times they are, but many times they are on the public market. And that's where I found this one. It was a publicly listed business, and took about a month and a half or a month to sell and close. And yeah, that was it. It was relatively straightforward to do. I kind of had some background being in law, looking through the contract and making sure I wasn't getting hosed somewhere, and keeping an eye on that. And also just having analyzed rental properties and stocks to invest in. A lot of the same fundamentals really do transfer over, since ultimately you're buying a revenue stream, which is the same as when you're buying a piece of property. You're buying a revenue stream, and you want to make sure you're getting a decent price on that stream. Acknowledge the risks before you go in. The risks will be different compared to a property in many cases, but the general fundamentals are ultimately the same. So that's why I was comfortable with it. And it has been a great experience that I've learned a lot from already in these first kind of 6 months.
Now, how much of your time has spent kind of managing it, getting familiar with it? Is it pretty hands-on, pretty hands-off? And what's the strategy? Is it really just keep the lights on the path it's going? Are you looking to make any changes to be able to grow, or what's the strategy there?
Yeah. So right now, I mean, it kind of varies how much time I'm spending on it. One of my first hires actually was a general manager. I was in big law at the time, so that's a lot of hours. I'm not in big law at this point. I actually very recently, in the last 2 months, really the last month it's been up and running, I started my own law practice. So that's kind of, whereas before I was doing big law full-time and then business and real estate and investing very part-time, that's kind of switched now, where I have a lot more time towards business and investing, and less time devoted towards law. And that might ebb and flow as I get more clients. I've got a couple I'm working with right now, while in kind of the commercial real estate space. Another way to make money in real estate is working on the transactional side, as you're plenty familiar with as an agent. So I see that long term as probably more of a side thing to help just have some extra sources for income and making connections with other investors and those sorts of people. But ultimately, I want this portfolio to grow and grow of having multiple businesses, not just this one. So with that in mind, since I'm trying to scale this portfolio, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't the prerequisite to keep the business running. So I hired a general manager right away to take control of the just day-to-day operations, so that I was spending way more of my time on finding more people to hire, selling, setting up systems and that sort of stuff. So it's however much time I really want to put into it. I haven't really been keeping track of the time I put in, but it's at least a few hours a week, sometimes many hours. But really, I don't have to be there. I can go on a trip and not really have to pay too much attention to it, because my manager has things under wraps. So that's really reassuring going forward, that as long as things can run smoothly, and we're trying a bunch of things out. So there's a lot of experiments here that are not profitable and some are, and we're kind of working through things, but it's all a learning process. And I want to make sure that I'm not micromanaging, though, because even though that might feel right in the moment, kind of like with, rental property management too, it's like I could do everything myself, but I really want to set up the systems to where this manager has the autonomy to make decisions himself, whether it be hiring or just day to day with customers, putting out fires, all that good stuff. I want my manager to have autonomy there, so that not only are they more confident in running things, I don't need to ask for permission to do anything, but that gives me more time to focus on the things that I think I can move the needle in a much bigger way with. Maybe that's finding other deals. Maybe that's just making some major strategic decision at a very macro level rather than getting into the weeds as much. It's all important. It's just kind of, where is my time best spent? And since I want to grow this portfolio, I don't think it's best spent in the weeds, even if that feels right today. I know long term it makes sense to try and teach someone else how to do that for the long term, and set up the incentives in such a way that makes sense, which is the tough part.
One of the things that I think works well with people is having things that complement each other, and having opportunities where things like you had mentioned kind of ebb and flow between your rental properties, your business, and your law practice. You really have control over your time. And, depending on the season, you can do a little bit over here, you can do a little bit over there. I have a friend that I've known in the real estate space that was an attorney, and then has over a few years shifted into real estate full time, and now shifted into commercial real estate. And he's talked to me in the past about how, depending on the season, depending on business and how businesses in each of the industries, you can kind of pick his time to insert here and there as things are building and growing. And I see somebody like you, as you've got the opportunity of choice here, where you can kind of pick and choose where you're going to spend your time, what's going to produce the most fruit. And at the end of the day, you're rolling a multifaceted snowball down the hill, but you get to pick and choose how you're spending your time, what you think is going to move the needle the most, and also gives you a little freedom of choice and variety, which is nice to be able to dabble in a few different things.
Yeah, that's really well said. And that's actually probably my number one challenge now. It's now that I'm not in big law, I've just, for context, I was part of a round of layoffs. Commercial transactions are down, I suppose. And I was part of a group. We're seeing a lot of layoffs throughout the big law space right now, especially in real estate and elsewhere. And it's funny because I was kind of scheming with another person, like, hey, maybe in a year's time, you think we should start our own firm or something like that. And that person was like, yeah, I kind of like that idea. Well, a week later, I get this layoff announcement. So I'm like, guess that decision was pulled forward quite a few months, but it really put me to the test. And like, okay, I have all this time back now. What am I going to do with it? I can spend it all towards the business. I could try to open up this law practice like I was kind of thinking about anyways. That seems like a really nice opportunity for the short to medium term, at least, since lawyers make decent money. So, might as well take advantage of that if I can. And that's a great vehicle to meet other people and a way to provide value to someone else. Then that's all the better. And I can be a lot more flexible with it, since I don't have another, like management or boss system over me. I am the boss of my own time and of however I want to arrange things with potential clients. So that's been very liberating. It's also just kind of nerve-wracking, because it's like, okay, now it's like, where do I want to actually shift this time? What actually makes sense? It's a good exercise to think about and go through, and I have really no choice but to do that now. So, but it is something I'm working on. This is a very kind of new arrangement now that we're really only a few months into this, to where I really don't answer to anyone other than myself or the people I specifically choose to answer to, if you know what I mean.
And your spouse.
Yeah, of course. Yes. I like to think we're aligned in a lot of on a lot of things, but yeah, it's definitely we have a very happy arrangement. There are hiccups as always, but well, we've gone through a lot just in the last year, moving from Chicago to Houston, and that overall has been good. In some areas, it's annoying because all of our family's up in Chicago, but in other areas, it's been great. She's got her career going, and that's been really awesome. A lot of opportunities down here. I like to think there's a much better entrepreneurial spirit down here, which I appreciate. So, and it's a lot warmer. The only time that's a problem is right now in the summer, but the other 8 months, it's great.
Real estate agents, having been full-time in real estate since 2014, the challenge that most agents have is being able to manage their schedule, because they like the freedom of their schedule. And what they don't realize is I could do anything with my time. So I could also choose to not work. And so a lot of people don't realize the actual amount of work it takes to build the momentum and to keep that momentum going. And because you have freedom of choice, because you don't have to answer to anybody, that is a challenge for some people because they don't know the best place to spend their time. And, I can go upstairs and go kill 2 hours spending time with my kids right now that, we're on summer break for them. So which I enjoy doing. I like the ability to have that choice, but I also need to continue to work on fueling the business and growing the business. And so it's finding that balance of what's the best use of my time. And when you're dabbling in a few different things, you got to figure out what's the most strategic way to move the needle.
Yeah, it's definitely not for everyone because you have to be okay with you're really just weighing opportunity cost and delayed gratification like in a major way all the time. By sacrificing things now, is that going to pay off later? The difference between this and like working a W-2 where you're getting a fixed salary every month, there's a lot more uncertainty. However, I would definitely counter that with, if you're working, if your only source of income is from a particular employer, that's not guaranteed, even if it feels like it, because you're one management decision away from getting booted for whatever reason. Ask me how I know. So like, it's like, I think when you have that perspective, I'm like, okay, every decision I make has a cost and nothing is guaranteed. So I'm going to have to just try and weigh things appropriately for both the short, medium, and long term, make sure everything's kind of covered, preferably leaning towards the long term if I can, because that's where the biggest payout will be. But it's definitely been a challenge, but it's been pretty fun. Maybe that's just because of the way I'm wired, and it sounds like the way you're wired very similarly in that that challenge of kind of putting the puzzle pieces together is very rewarding. And at least when it goes right, because it very much is rewarding. And maybe one of the reasons it is rewarding is because sometimes it doesn't go right and you really see all that. So, you see both sides of that when you're in full control. You can't really point the finger at other people. And I think that's a really good thing for if you're kind of wired in that particular way. It's definitely not for everyone.
I'm on a mindset coaching call, a mastermind group. And so I was just on a call shortly before we're recording this, and they were talking about this person has been a coach for a long time. And he said, I would go into sales organizations and talk about like, who wants to double their income? And everybody's like, yeah, I want to do that. And he's like, okay, so what if I said it means you have to double your problems to be able to double your income? And people are like, whoa, it's like, and that's the thing. He said, normal people will work until it gets hard. High achievers work until the work is done. And that's the challenge is, yes, it's hard, it's challenging, but I'm not going to give up because I'm not finished yet. And I continue to push through. And the more problems you solve, the more your income is going to continue to grow. And it's refining you and shaping you and making you stronger. And so it's a challenge. It's like, and then people look up when you're successful and you've sold a business, you're making a bunch of money, and everybody says like, oh, you have it really well. You were really lucky. It's like, sure. No, it's the iceberg. It's all the stuff below the water that you don't see that it took to get to where you're at today.
Yeah. I don't mean to suggest that either approach is better than the other. I think a lot of it has to just do with incentives, because maybe you are someone who's wired for the long term and really do put in big effort, but you just have circumstances that incentivize you to act in a certain way. Like maybe you have a ton of debt, you had a medical accident or something, or a medical bill that came up, to where it doesn't make sense to focus for some delayed payoff thing because you need something right now. Or, you have kids you're putting through school and you want to give the best opportunity for them. Yeah, and, there's a lot of factors there to where even if you are a super hard worker and you do go the extra mile, sometimes it just makes sense to go for that short-term win at the expense of the long term because you need that for the short term to get through a problem. So, and some people are just wired that way anyways, and as long as they're okay with it and don't point the finger at others if the long term isn't as great, and they're enjoying the short term in the meantime. So this kind of depends on your preference. It's just some people are wired to really just constantly look at the future and the long term as opposed to the here and now. There's plenty of cost to that, especially when it comes to just frustration and mental health, I suppose. But everything's a system of trade-offs. Some things will help a lot more for some time and others will not. So not to say that either is better or worse. It really just kind of depends on the situation and what you're going for.
Delayed gratification is nice. Sometimes you also need instant gratification to give you that energy boost for the delayed gratification.
Sure. Yeah. And in that way, the short-term win becomes the long-term win too, so it's kind of like a game of mental gymnastics there, I guess.
Now, for somebody that likes putting out content, making this show, doing this content, it's great. I know that you do some great content with a YouTube channel that's got over 5,000 subscribers. So congrats on that. I'd love to hear a little bit more kind of about that journey and your process and how that's worked building your YouTube following.
Yeah. So I started that while I was in law school. I think January 2020 is when I started it. So I'm doing it for a few years now. And didn't have an exact goal in mind. It was more just as a way to kind of document, talk about what I'm learning or what I'm going through. What it's really become is a great way to meet other people. I mean, yourself included, and plenty of other creators too, where I wouldn't have really thought to reach out to people. And when you have a little bit of an audience, it makes it very easy to connect with people, because sometimes one of your audience members will be like, hey, I know this person, or maybe that audience person is someone with another channel or has a business, or maybe doesn't necessarily create, but it's been really awesome for that. I've met a number of great people through YouTube, even at my relatively small channel size of, 5,000 or 6,000. I forget what I'm at now, but it's really just been awesome for that. And but like I said, overall, I'm just trying to talk about my experiences and what I've taken away from it. If that's helpful to anyone, then great. Sometimes I get some feedback on things that makes me think about something in a little bit of a different way, or a lot of a different way. So that's pretty nice too. You have a lot of helpful, thoughtful people in the audience too, that can help kind of keep me honest, or just point something out that I might have not realized, which I really appreciate. So it's been a great journey, and thank you for the kind words about the content.
Yeah. So is it something, thinking about how you're spending your time and managing your time, are you putting together this content, in spurts where it's, once a week you plan it out, once a month, or kind of how do you do it? Or just when it comes to you just pull out your phone and shoot, or your camera, or how do you focus on kind of keeping that content consistent?
Yeah, I've well, for now, just one recurring video every month, and I do like a net worth update every month, where I go over the change in my net worth from the previous month, whether that's good or bad or positive, negative, show all my debts, assets, everything's on there, and kind of go through that exercise. The idea is that I'm tracking till I get to $1 million in net worth and a $30,000 per year passive in quotes, income. So I'm just kind of documenting that process every single month on the first. But otherwise, I try to put something out every week, maybe a few shorts, ideally a long form or two. Trying to do a live stream series where I talk about what's going on with the business as well, and things I'm learning from that previous week or month or however long it's been between episodes. But I just I have editors helping me out. So so I don't have to put a ton of time towards it. I do put significant amounts of time, but I think it's worthwhile. And I just try to have something in the pipeline at any given time. And that often comes out to 1 to 2 videos per week, long form, and maybe 1 or 2 shorts is kind of the target, but it's a very soft target. The point is, I don't want this to consume my life, because it's kind of this weird paradox with creators. It's like, you want to be doing interesting things, or things that are helpful or entertaining. But eventually you kind of see the shift sometimes, especially in finance, where guys will go full time into creating just content, but now they're not doing anything interesting in the investing world. So it's like, well, what are they going to talk about? So they often just talk about making content. So it's, it's, you kind of lose that sort of uniqueness. So I never want content to be, in the majority of what I'm doing. And it's certainly not. I always want to make sure that content comes second to whatever I'm doing first. And I know you're the same way since you run your agency, and that's I'm sure takes way more time than putting out the content, even though you do spend significant time towards it.
I think you have to enjoy doing it. For some people do see the short-term success with it right away. I view it as it's that delayed gratification, right?
Yeah.
One of the most impactful things to me that really kind of got me over my own mental hurdle of creating content is, think about this as a legacy that family members, can look back on later in life. When Mike's passed away at some point, the internet's going to be there, right? And so they can go back and watch videos of dad or grandpa or whoever. And so to me, I was like, this is, just like you documenting your journey. I'm not necessarily sharing one-to-one as much as you are, like month by month by month, but the stuff that I'm talking about are the experiences that I'm having, interviewing guests like yourself. All of this stuff are things that I'm learning and growing and doing. And so, yeah, I can look back on that and, and be something that I'm proud of. And so that was kind of that mental hurdle for me, where it's like, I'm okay making content and putting myself out there, because I'm an extreme introvert. I'm a pretty private person. And yet at the same time, I do a podcast twice a week and I put out all this video content. But if you go up to me, if we had a networking event, I'm probably the person that's talking to one other person, because the batteries drain when I'm out talking to a lot of people, and I fill my batteries by, spending time by myself or thinking or, meditating, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. That was at least a partial motivator too, kind of just to see where the perspectives have gone. And one thing I think will be kind of nice is you could really point to shifts in thinking or an approach, and it's all kind of there. So if someone says, "Oh, that didn't happen," or I guess kind of what you're saying before, "Oh, it's just all luck." Well, I could be like, I mean, you could think that, but like, if you want to get like an actual lesson out of it, perhaps like here it all is. You can see what I did. Maybe it'll work now, maybe not, but it's kind of nice just to have that to point to. But you can't really do it if you don't document it. Preferably closer to the actual date it happened. So that was kind of one reason. And even now, like looking back a couple of years ago at some of my content, my thinking has changed quite a bit on some things. I don't think I've ever deleted. No, maybe I've deleted a video that had a mistake in it that I replaced thereafter, but I don't think I've ever deleted any other videos. Even if I don't necessarily agree with them, because I try to just come from a place of good faith, and trying to be honest and really just talk about things honestly. And even if that might be a little bit off or my opinion has changed, I don't want to remove that, because I was coming at it from a good view. If I need to clarify something, then sure. But I don't. Sometimes I don't like how people will hide their mistakes or whatever, even if they have grown from them since then. It's just I don't really like that vibe. So yeah, that's kind of another reason. And you mentioned kind of the social battery too. It has helped kind of with that for me. I'm generally pretty extroverted. I've gotten more as time goes along, maybe because of the channel, but I recently did a meetup in Chicago. I did a meetup as well in Omaha, just with a lot of people who watch my content. And I was able to get like a dozen people to show up in Chicago to just hanging out at a kind of a happy hour sort of thing I hosted. And that was great, just meeting other people who kind of follow along with whatever I've got going on, and some who really don't, but were friends with people who did, and they came along. So just that I think is a really huge opportunity when you can build any sort of following. I guess maybe in one word, it's branding. That's just very nice to have when you have a positive following that's focusing more on the educational aspects of your content, or maybe just chiming in with their own reflections. It's just like a nice community to be able to not necessarily lean on, but there's a lot of value that can be exchanged in many different directions when you can put something like that together. So something I'm really looking to do more long-term is meetups and those sorts of things, partly through the channel and also outside of it.
I think what it does, putting yourself out there, is it does open the door for future opportunity. It also
Right.
allows people to connect with you. I was talking with this about this with somebody else who has a large social media following, and he was saying, if I cold call people, it's 1-to-1, right? I'm picking up the phone, I'm
Right.
talking to one person, picking up the phone, talking to one person. You put this content out there, you allow people to connect on a one-to-many level. So how many times would people reach out and they're like, oh, I feel like I already know you because I've seen your content. And so that's what you're
Yes.
doing, is you're cultivating relationships to where when they do want to reach out to you, they know you. And what he was saying as a real estate agent is it's not like they're going to call you and be like, hey, I've been watching your stuff for the last 6 months. I'd like to sell my house, and I'm also interviewing for other agents. So if you could just share with me why I should hire you. No, it's usually you
Right.
got the listing. These are the come list me's because they've seen you, they know, like, and trust you based on the content that you've put out there. And so it allows you to build relationships without having to pound the phones, 1-to-1. You're doing it 1-to-many. Real estate agents, are you tired of letting the busyness of your real estate business get in the way of your real estate investing goals and your financial future? I'm excited to announce that we've created the REL Freedom Investor Agent Tribe to help you. We've got a ton of content, educational tools to help accelerate your learning curve and get you on the right path to hit your investing goals. We also have a mastermind tribe of people just like you, agents that want to grow their own portfolio and encourage you and cheer you on along the way, as well as some private one-on-one coaching. So go to realfreedom.com, click on the store, you'll see the options there. We're so excited to be able to help you. I've priced it super low so price can't get in the way, but did want to have some skin in the game for you to help with that accountability. So go check it out, realfreedom.com, click on the store. We're excited to connect with you and excited for you to connect with your tribe of real estate agents investing, trying to build their financial freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the scale is unmatched because of that. That was actually, I think, my very, very initial motivation to put out any content ever. I started like with a little blog, just jackduffley.com. I was like, okay, I want to make sure I can land that domain in case I ever need it. So I bought that in college. And one of the first things I ever wrote about was my personal statement for law school, how I got a full ride to law school, how I improved on the LSATs and kind of law school stuff. Because I had a bunch of friends from undergrad who were going through the process like a year after I did. And I just kept in the same questions over and over, like, what'd you do here? And I wanted to help them, but it was just getting exhausting, like having to regurgitate the same thing over and over. So I'm like, okay, I'll put it in article form, and then I can just point to that, since it's all the same stuff. Um, so that kind of is how it got going for that very reason. So that's very well said.
As you think about the future, kind of what's some stuff that's rattling around in your head here moving forward?
Oh, lots of things, Mike. But so I mean, right now I'm definitely pushing harder and harder on the law firm lever, just because I've gotten some traction right away, and uh, I got a lot of good feedback. Like when I announced that I wasn't going to be in big law anymore and was going to be going solo, a lot of people who ran their own firms and who maybe had gone through a similar path were like, "Yeah, man, it's the best opportunity or like the best thing I've ever done." Like, you really should definitely go do it. It'll be way more flexible and all the great benefits of running your own business. In this case, my own law practice. Um, so that was just like a nice reassurance, and I've already gotten a couple of clients under my belt. I'm working on a few things right now, and that's been really nice. And I want to keep leaning on that, just because it's a great way to meet a lot of people and build trust with people. So that's kind of what I want to do, because just for clarification, I do real estate and transactions. I'm not doing litigation. So it's very cordial in that way, and that both parties want to get to the same point. And just as you see, being a real estate agent, both parties want to get to the same point. So it makes it a lot easier than if both parties are at odds with each other. So
Yep.
it's a lot more of a positive space than law might have a reputation for. So I do like that. And right now, I just think it's one of my better income opportunities at the same time, just given where I'm at, given my skills, or lack thereof in certain areas. Maybe if I was a better manager, I'd be focusing way more on that. But for now, I guess you could say I'm a better attorney than a manager, or at least I think I am. So I'm focusing on that, but the management skill is still being built up as I work on the business portfolio. And eventually it'll just make more sense to focus on something else, I would think, or maybe not, who knows, but yeah, that in the kind of medium to short term, I'm just focusing on trying to meet more people, let people know what I got going on. if I'm able to help in some way, I can clean your carpets. I can, I can provide legal services. I can help with the media stuff potentially. So there are things I can offer value for, and eventually, I know if I keep doing that sort of thing, I'll hear about different opportunities, maybe be able to get into them, or even on the law firm side of things. Because I'm solo now, I can take equity in a deal rather than taking cash, if that makes sense for someone to do. Like I'm flexible in that way. So a lot of opportunities there to potentially work through. And so that's really what I'm focusing on, just meeting people, trying to provide value in some way. And in the meantime, just continuing to keep an eye on that business portfolio, look for deals and try to build that up over time. Eventually we'll get back hard into real estate.
It's a fantastic opportunity. You're kind of developing your toolbox of the different stuff you're working on. And yeah, you've got versatility, you've got that flexibility, you can pick and choose where you're going to insert yourself. And as things grow over time, you can be moldable to that. So I think you're on a great path. And I think that's the thing, that as I talk about building wealth and gaining time and financial freedom through real estate is, there's a lot of people in your shoes deciding where to spend your time. And there's a lot of real estate investors that do that on the side part-time. And so you're kind of figuring out how to best deploy your strategy. So that's an awesome spot to be in, and you built some net, whereas as things change, you've got a little bit of real estate income, you've got that growing, you've got your business growing, you've got your law practice growing. And so that's awesome. So congrats on what you're doing. How can people reach out to you if they want to learn more?
Sure. So I'm Jack Duffley on YouTube. Just my name. I should be Jack Duffley just about everywhere on social media. I'm trying to get more active on Twitter too. So check that out, or you can go to jackduffley.com/links, and that's links plural, and you'll be able to see kind of everything there as well, including a link to my law practice as well. If you happen to need something, I'm licensed in Illinois and Texas, so happy to help there if that happens to be you.
Great story, and best of luck to you in the future.
Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate it.